Live. So excited you're here. This is going to be a fun one. Gosh, Lindsay, I think I've known you, 3 years now since Momentum. So yeah, this is going to be a fun show. We've also got the unsinkable Connor Brown with us today. How are things in Florida, Connor? Is it a little toasty?
Things are great. Yeah, it's toasty, of course.
Yeah.
I want to do a little behind the scenes for the viewers out there. Jeff, we have a little pre-show, and
Right.
then Jeff's, all right, it's good to go. And he hits the live button, and there's about 5 seconds, I would say, where it's catching onto the live,
Right.
and we don't say anything. And I want to say that is a very peaceful yet stressful moment all at the same time.
You never know what's going to happen.
Thank you, hoping everything's working. You're doing the same.
You never know. Yeah, so this is going to be a fun one. We haven't done this sort of topic before, and it's so weird that we haven't because so many people do this. Like side hustle is what a lot of people start off on. I put in the email, everybody's saying like, I can make all this money and X amount of money on the beach and do all this stuff. That is very, very, very rare. Most people that I know like started with a job and then like maybe started doing something on the side. Some people, that's what they do. Like for me, I have solid clients. Like I do the podcast for Guy Kawasaki, but I also do all this stuff on to kind of supplement the income. So, and a lot of people, and then they slowly switch to maybe doing their own thing. So this is, I think, a topic. I don't know why we don't talk about it more. It's really fascinating. I think it's the fastest path. I don't think anything else is like winning the lottery. I mean, wouldn't you agree? It's kind of like, you see those things, but you're like, I don't know. That's just like lightning striking. So anyway, this is going to be a fascinating conversation. I am going to get started because I have a ton of questions for Lindsay. So I'm going to hit go on the podcast machine and we will get started. Hello, folks. Welcome to Social Media News Live. I'm Jeff C., and you're not.
And I'm Connor Brown, and this is the show that keeps you up to date on what's happening in the world of social media and more.
You ever wondered how to grow a successful business while working full-time? Or maybe you're curious on how to manage your side hustle effectively. Maybe you're just looking to turn your passion into a thriving venture where you are in control. If these things are questions that you're asking yourself, then today's show is perfect for you. Today we have a special guest who is a side hustle success. Lindsay Dollinger Dollinger, I said it wrong. I knew I would. Has built a successful coaching business while teaching full-time. She'll share her journey, her strategies, and her tips for balancing multiple roles. So sit back, clear your schedule, clear your mind, and get ready for this week's episode of Social Media News Live. Lindsay, how are you doing today?
I am doing fabulous. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm super excited to chat today, guys.
Yeah, this is going to be a lot of fun. We've already got our friends showing up. We got Mr. Gary Stockton saying, happy Friday, beautiful people of social media. Thank you, Gary, so much for always tuning in and the great comments that you always bring us.
Is a beautiful person of social media as well.
We
are very excited today. Oh, look, Rich is here. Hello, Rich. But if you don't know who Lindsay is, you should, because Lindsay is a woman's business coach, podcast host of the Purpose and Pixie Dust podcast, and creator of the Confident and Ambitious Mastermind. She has been a Spanish teacher for 15 years and started growing her online businesses in 2016. Today, she helps women manage their businesses. Thanks again, Lindsay, for being on the show. We're so excited to have you.
Yay, thank you. I can't wait to chat and share everything that I have learned.
And by the way, this show is brought to you by our folks at Ecamm. You can find out more about them at ecamm.com/Jeff. They've got amazing things going on. Creator Camp is coming up at the end of this year. Unfortunately, tickets are sold out, but never fear, my friends. You can actually enter to win a chance for a ticket to Creator Camp. If you go to jeffc.com/win, you can be entered for a chance to win a ticket to Creator Camp. I went last year. It was amazing. Connor Brown is going this year. So if you want to go see and Connor and get his autograph, all that sort of thing, you can get your chance to win at jeffc.com/win. I hope to see you guys there. All right. So we are going to dive into this. Like so many people, like we were saying, Connor, like you mentioned, Rich is chiming in on the comments saying, hey, this is great for someone like me who's juggling a side hustle and a full-time job. Highly interested in hearing this conversation. Well, I'm sure we're going to give Rich and everybody else a great set of tips. So, Lindsay, I just want to kind of jump right into some of these questions here. And you've been teaching for 15 years, right? So How do you manage to balance this full-time teaching job with your business? Because you don't just have one thing. You got a mastermind, you got your blog post, you got your podcast. You're not just doing one thing. You've got a lot of stuff. So how do you balance all of that?
Well, I think the first thing that I want to point out is that I didn't start with all of these pieces in my business at once. So start with one thing, because it will be extremely hard to balance all of the different pieces of your business if you don't have one core offer that you get really good at before you start adding in other things. So that's my very first tip, because it can be really easy to look in on the outside and be like, oh, she teaches and has the mastermind and the podcast and all those things. So I started with one thing, and that was just a free Facebook group. And I started really building a community around that. And then I started adding the other pieces in. But to go back to your original question, and this sounds so simple, but really just being intentional about planning my time out, figuring out what pieces of my business actually are bringing me the income, and focusing on those. There's that saying, and I'm going to totally butcher it, but 80% of your results come from 20% of your time. Have you heard that before?
Yeah.
Correct me on how. Okay.
It's close enough. Yeah.
Yeah. So once I realized that, and realized that my results weren't coming from, necessarily one social media post, but it was coming from my consistency of showing up on social media. It was coming from conversations. It was coming from sending out a regular email. And so making sure I was putting my time in that versus, I'm trying to think of something now, because I haven't done a lot of non-income producing activities in a while now, but spending an hour creating a graphic on social media, for example. So getting very intentional about where I spend my time and planning that time in, because I realized if I wasn't literally putting it on my calendar and my phone, I would find something else to do to fill that time. And then it would be 8:00 at night. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't work my business today. And then I realized when I wasn't showing up and working my business, when I was treating it more as a hobby than a business, I was seeing hobby results instead of business results, because people weren't taking me seriously, because I wasn't taking myself seriously. So, really stepping into that mindset of, this is my business. I'm a CEO of it. Even if it means I only am working it an hour a day or 2 hours a day or whatever worked for me, staying consistent with that allowed me to get the results that I was able to get.
I love that. That's so awesome. And I think it's so important too, because if you want it to be a hobby, have it be a hobby, right? There's no harm in that. But if you want it to grow and you want it to actually be something, you have to be consistent. And more so, Lindsay, I love that point of treat it with respect, right? Actually respect what you're doing. You have to be the first one to do that before others can start to see your success and acknowledge sort of that stuff. So keeping consistent with that. I think you've been a Spanish teacher for 15 years now. You probably had that goal of becoming a teacher, right? And you probably worked for a number of years and you liked it, or you saw its pros and its cons and those sorts of things. But then for whatever reason, a light bulb went off in your head of, hey, you know what? I want to supplement this. I want to build a business. I want to start something on the side. So what kind of inspired you to start growing your online businesses as you were still maintaining being a Spanish teacher?
I love that question. So I kind of fell into it, to be honest, and I never went into it with the idea of being a business owner. That was so beyond me, because like you said, my whole identity really was wrapped around teaching. I knew when I was a 5-year-old that I wanted to be a teacher. So it was a very strange thing. And honestly, that's where the piece kind of came in with the mindset where I'm like, okay, I have to start treating that, like you said, with the respect of a business, because if I don't, people have, I am a teacher in people's minds. So people are never going to see me in that role. And that was really hard for me just mentally to do that. But it's kind of a sad story. I'm always like, oh, but my mom passed away in January 2015 after a 16-year battle with breast cancer. And I'm just extremely close to my family. I still am with my dad and sister. We just went on a European vacation together. And so after that happened, I felt almost like I was in an identity crisis, because all of my friends that I had my entire life, or, in my adulthood before that, knew me as one person with this complete family, and knew me as this happy Lindsay, and, had no cares in the world. And then when that happened, I had never really experienced that kind of grief before. And I was going to the gym a lot as a way, like they say in Legally Blonde, like endorphins make you happy. So I'm like, okay,
Right.
this has to work. So I fell into a network marketing company. At the time, it was called Beachbody. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to give this a try. I'm just going to see what happens. I was very against network marketing. I had heard all of the stigma around it. And I'm like, you know what? This is something different. And it just so happened that the team that I joined was an amazing community. They really allowed me to kind of be the version of me that I wanted to be, like my old self, without kind of knowing about like the dark stuff that I was going through. So it was like a way for me, like an outlet rather.
Yeah.
And as I got started with it, I learned about personal development. So I started reading all of these mindset books, and it really helped me get through that dark period of time. I'm like, okay, I actually can work on my mindset. Like I had no idea that that realm even existed, And I think that is one thing in the education space that we really don't do a service to, is that for teachers, especially, we could use all the mindset work, like I think every profession can, but it's just something that wasn't there. And so I was really intrigued by that. I was very interested in that. It really helped me get through that time. And then as I started doing that, I was like, well, this is a creative outlet for me. This is a place where I can do things that I don't get to do in my teaching job. And so it also kept me distracted, and it
Mm-hmm.
had me doing things that, like I said, I wasn't able to do in my teaching job. So long story short, I became very successful in my network marketing business because I was pouring this time and energy into it. I was learning new things. It was exciting. And as I started doing that and started seeing results, I was like, well, this is awesome. Like making
Right.
another, $500, $1,000, earning trips, doing all these things. And then also helping people along the way was just like a really great feeling. So I got really hooked in that realm of business. And then long story short, after doing network marketing for a few years and getting to the top of my company, I realized that the piece of my business that I really, really loved was helping women build out their own business and be successful. And so then that's when I pivoted to coaching, podcasting, building my own products so that I didn't have to rely on the rules, the regulations of a network marketing company,
Mm-hmm.
that I could literally build anything that I wanted to build and teach other people how to do the same. And that, that freedom of creativity, of time, of actually being able to own my income. Whereas teaching, it's capped. It doesn't matter
Right.
how good of a job you do. You can't make more than X amount of money. And so that was also very intriguing to me as a teacher, because I had never knew that was a possibility. So yeah,
Mm.
that's the long story of how I got started.
So that's very cool. And I wanted to ask this question about like your goals. Are you planning on, like, if you build the business so much, I'm going to quit teaching, or are you planning on like, I'm going to continue teaching till I'm going to retire and then I'll go into this full time? Like, kind of what are your long-term goals with this side hustle, or does that change? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I know when I started out, it was a lot different than where I am now, and the goals that I have. So kind of talk about your goals through this side hustle, where you want to see it and where you want to end up.
So it does change. There are some days, and especially since your wife's a teacher,
Right.
I
Right.
think education has changed so much from when I began teaching that it's not the same. It's
Mm-hmm.
not the same environment. It's not the same as it used to be, which nothing is. But I would really love to build my business to a certain point and then, yeah, be able to say, like, my teaching in a
Mm-hmm.
traditional classroom is complete. And now I am teaching women in an online space. I'm a teacher in both. And I think that was a huge mindset piece for me as well. I was working through that last year with my coaches because I was so reluctant to even put it on my, my vision board as a goal to leave teaching, because it's just so ingrained in me. And she pointed out, like, hey, you're still teaching. Like, you're literally still teaching. I'm like, that's such a good point. It just looks a
Mm-hmm.
little bit different. But I think the beauty in it is that I don't have to if I don't want to. Like, I have built my business as such with systems, with automation, things like that, that I can easily run both if I wanted to, but I still have the option to leave it if I want to as well. So I like that ability to be able to choose down the road.
Awesome. One of the things, my wife's a teacher, and I know how hard it is, how much underpaid it is, and lesson plans and getting all that together. So I want to know, you mentioned that you're very, very specific on how you block out your time, but what are some of the biggest challenges you face when you started your side hustle, and then what did you do to like overcome those? Like that you realize, I guess for one thing, you realize you needed a time block, but what are some other challenges you did and what and you faced, and then what you did to kind of overcome those?
Ooh, that's good. Okay, so one of the first in regards to time, going back to time,
Mm-hmm.
is, and I kind of mentioned this earlier, is knowing really what to spend my time on or getting distracted with the shiny objects. Like, I need to
Right.
sign up for another course, I need to do another training. And I definitely think there's a time and place for all of those things, but I had to get really disciplined with myself and like, okay, Lindsay, you can watch this other training, you can participate in this course, but you need to allow yourself then an hour to implement until you do something else. And so getting very clear on that was a big help in my business. Also using, I hate saying multitasking because
Right.
it kind of is, but I would listen to trainings or podcasts in the car on my commute, on my lunch hour, on my planning hour. And I would still be working on doing things or cutting things, things that were kind of mindless. But I was absorbing a lot of my business training at the same time to really utilize like every little spare moment of my time that I could. And sometimes that meant skipping lunch in the teacher's lounge, which
Right.
isn't always the most positive environment anyway.
Right.
So I would do that 2-3 times a week. And at one point in my business, I would do it every day. I would skip like lunch down there and I would eat lunch in my room while I was watching a training in a course that I was in or responding to people's messages or things like that. And I knew that was just kind of a season of my life that I had to do that. I didn't always have to skip that. Or if there was a day when I just knew I needed some real human interaction, I allowed myself that too,
Right.
so getting really clear on that too. But then the other thing that was really challenging was, again, going back to the mindset, because I would hear a lot of comments like, I'm trying to think of what some of them were, like basically like, who are you to be doing the thing that you're doing? Like, and hearing that, and I still sometimes hear it, to this day, like, well, you don't have a degree in business and you don't have that. You're a Spanish teacher, your master's is in Spanish. How are you applying that? And so that's when the mindset work comes in, where you're either reading the books or listening to the podcast or just getting yourself in community. Like, that's why I love the Momentum community so much is, every time that we go to that event or to a retreat, you completely get absorbed with people's energy that
Right.
they're doing the same thing that you're doing. So that was one of the things that I had to do, is create my communities. And I have several different ones of those, and put myself in those places with people who would support me and get it, and realize that my work people aren't going to get it. And that's okay. They don't have to. And that took a lot of a shift for me too.
Was that from those negative Nellies is what we'll call them? Was that from the teacher groups that you were in that were saying like, who are you to do an online course, or was it family or friends? Who were putting those negative?
All of the above.
Okay. Yeah.
All of the,
Right.
a little bit of all the above. And it wasn't always necessarily, I think, meant to be negative, but it's just people would ask questions in a way of like, I don't really understand this thing that you're doing, or, why don't you just come to lunch and do all that later? Or, just different things like that. And like I said, I just had to really realize that I need to find my business friends, my business community, and then realize that my friends and family or my coworkers aren't necessarily going to understand this other passion that I have. And that's totally okay. They don't have to.
Yeah. And I know you believe in the power of masterminds because you run one, and, I do as well, and been a part of a lot of them. And so if you're not a part of one, you need to find one, because they can change your business. So anyway,
one thing that you said, Lindsay, that I want to thank you for, because it like unlocked something in my head, was, all right, I'm not going to watch another training until I take an hour to implement what I learned from this first one. I don't know why, but the way you phrase that just like opened my mind, because we do it all the time. We're like, you know what, I need to watch one more video. Like, no, what you need to do is actually put something into practice.
Yeah.
Right. So scheduling your time in that situation where you're like, okay, I'm going to set aside enough time to watch the training and to put something in place. I absolutely love that. And we had a great comment from Rich, who was talking about imposter syndrome. He says, imposter syndrome finds its way into our minds easily enough. We sure don't need help from comments like that. And we don't. It can be kind of a block to our momentum, our where we're going, and it can really weigh us down too, especially when you need to get motivated for these things. So strategies around staying motivated, especially Lindsay, when you talk about how this side hustle, you don't necessarily need it, right? You could just stay with being a Spanish teacher, right? It's not life or death. Maybe you want to get to that point at some time where it is fully, but for right now, um, you don't have to be 100%, going full throttle on one thing. And I think for sometimes when it is a side hustle, it is tough to stay motivated, especially when you've had a draining day at work and you come home and you have to put in the hours and you have to invest in your business. So can you share some strategies around just staying both motivated and organized while you're juggling both of these roles at the same time?
I love that question. So I think one of the things that has helped me the most, and it can be kind of tricky to figure this out at the very beginning of your business, but creating offers that truly light you up and are offers that really align with your goals, your amount of time that you have, your strengths, but are also offers that will serve your clients in the best way. And that took me a little while to figure out because I was just looking at what everyone else was doing and what everyone else, it seemed to work for them. And so one of my first things that I offered was one-on-one coaching. And I love one-on-one coaching, don't get me wrong. But one of the things that was tricky with one-on-one coaching, like you said, is I would come home from work and maybe had a completely draining day. And I had a couple calls booked that night, or maybe 3 or 4 calls in a row. And I would get on them and I would just have to like pull every ounce of energy out of myself to get on those calls and to really show up for these people that I wanted to. And so I realized that was not the most sustainable thing for me at my current space in my business, or that I couldn't book 4 in one night. So I used to do the same thing with my podcast interviews. I would book 2, 3, 4 in a row on one evening just to get them done for the month. But then I realized by interview number 3 that I was like resenting showing up. And I never want to resent showing up because then you get burnout, you start to hate it. And that was one thing that I was like, okay, what am I doing wrong? And so I love batching my workout as much as I can, but I also realize that there are limits to how much, and this could just be my personality too. Like maybe other people can do 5, 6 in a row and that really lights them up. For me, it was just so draining. And so I realized that creating a membership, a group container, even courses or a planner or those are all things that I have had is ways that I can work with people, still get them results, but also, me showing up is a minimal amount of time so that when it is actually my time to get on Zoom with my clients or show up and do a live or things like that, I'm actually excited for doing it because no one wants to, show up and your coach is like, I don't want to be here, that stinks for everyone. So that was probably my biggest thing.
So we have Mary Hollister over, I think, Taylor, I think, says running a side hustle. Yeah, I'll let you say it because I will mess it up.
I know her. That's how I know.
I'll just say Mary. Mary says running a side hustle is not for the weak. Very, very true. But I thought it was interesting what you just talked about, Lindsay, was that you knew yourself enough to go like, okay, I can only batch so much, and then I'm not. It's diminishing returns after that. So I think that's very important, is knowing. Like for me, it's not so much time management anymore. It's energy management. I know that I'm jazzed to write like an email in the morning. In the afternoon, not so much. I can edit a podcast or something. Like I know where it hits me with the energy, and I think learning that, and that changes throughout life. I used to be able to go all night and like edit till the morning hours. Not anymore. I need my sleepy time. So, one of the things, we got another great question. By the way, ask your questions. If you're struggling with your side hustle or you have questions for Lindsay, who's been doing this for such a long time and has had really good success, make sure you ask those in the comments. We'll try to bring those up on screen. And Abby over on LinkedIn says, do you have daily habits or routines that help with planning and keeping your energy up?
Yes, absolutely. So I work out usually work out. Right now I have a cast on my leg so that my habits have changed a little bit, but normally in the normal year I make sure to work out 4 or 5 times a week, like making that very intentional, and I schedule that in my calendar. So that's one thing to keep my energy up. And I like to do that between school and working my business. That way it's like kind of me getting rid of my school energy and then transitioning my energy into my work environment. So it doesn't have to be working out, but if you have something like that, that can be almost like your trigger that you are ending full-time job and you're coming into your side hustle, maybe that's a walk, listening to a song, whatever it is for you, what, kind of be like a switch. That's really helpful. I spend Saturday and Sunday mornings planning my week out. So I will get my calendar out for the week. Like I like a physical written calendar, but I also use reminders and the calendar app on my phone. And I get an overview of all the things that I have going on in that week that are non-business related. So appointments, things at school, etc. Though family time and personal time, workouts. I didn't ever used to schedule those in. And then I would get to the end of the night and it would be 9:00 at night. I'm like, okay, I didn't talk to any of my friends. I haven't, seen my family in a certain amount of time. And that leads to burnout really quickly. So you have to schedule in the fun stuff. And I know it sounds silly, like who wants to schedule in, I don't know, seeing your family or going to a movie or different, whatever it is for you. But until you get to the point where it becomes routine, try scheduling it in. And that way you make it so much part of a habit that eventually you won't have to do those things. But I look at my calendar and then I see, okay, I have 2 hours on Monday, 1 hour on Tuesday, nothing on Wednesday, 3 hours on Thursday, whatever, and schedule that in for my business. Then I take out a list and I make a list of tasks for my business. So I like brain dump everything that needs done. I like to look at it in a quarterly segment. So probably every quarter, I look at my year-long plan and divide everything from a year down to my quarters of the year. And then that way I'm able to plan, okay, I'm going to be doing I'm getting ready to launch my mastermind next month. And I've known about that the entire year. I knew I was going to launch it in July to start in August. So that way I can work backwards to plan out my content, to plan out my launch strategy, emails, etc., so that nothing is waiting until last minute, because things in life happen. I was in the hospital for a week in April when I fell. And thankfully, my business was not affected because everything was already batched out. It was planned ahead. And my business was still able to run without me being, fully present. And so I've learned the hard way, back when I first started my business and I would get sick and I'm like, well, no podcast this week because I have no voice. And so making sure that I'm always at least a week ahead on everything that I want, coming up. And then I'm able to schedule that in. So one thing that I have realized, especially during the school year, I don't do it as much during the summer when I have off, but when I am working full time and doing my business, I batch out, a theme day. So, Tuesdays, I only record podcasts now on Tuesdays. Yeah. And it's so much better for planning, for energy, for all of that, because I know I have to show up for my podcast interview on Tuesdays. And when I first started that, I thought that I was going to be eliminating possible guests because I'm like, what if guests are not available on Tuesdays from 4 to 6 p.m.? Because, a lot of people do their business work during, normal business hours. So I've never had anyone say that they couldn't. And so that was one of those things, I was so in my head like, oh my gosh, I need to have every day of the week open for people to schedule, but that's so draining. So I plan content on Mondays. Tuesdays is my podcast day. Wednesdays, I do connection with people. So I'm in the DMs. I'm responding to comments, responding to emails. Thursdays, I'm working on systems, different things in the back end to make my business run easier. Fridays, I do follow-ups. And then the weekend is just fun things, me interacting or creating something because I really love creation for offers. Or just taking the time off, and then also planning for the week ahead. I have a set time that I do that too. And that works really, really well for me.
I love the idea of theme days, and I'm trying to do more of that. But I think, they say that multitasking kills a lot of creativity. You have to 30 minutes to get back on task or whatever. So I love that idea of focusing, and I've been trying to do okay, this is podcast day. Okay, this is, whatever day. But I think also, Lindsay, one of the things seeing and kind of digging into what you've been saying is your consistency. And that's why we always have the live show 10 a.m. Central Fridays all the time. Yeah. And like you, there's been once or twice we've had a guest who couldn't make it, and it's because they have something on Fridays, and I'm like, that's when we do it. That's just how it is. I hate that we don't get to have you, but that's when we have it. So I think half the part, what is it? Somebody said most of success is just showing up. If you show up consistently every day, it makes a big difference. I want to bring up Dustin's comment. He goes, yes, energy management is something he's been talking about for years. In fact, I remember Dustin talking about one time when he started kind of get a slump in the afternoon, he'd go and do push-ups. Now, I haven't been that crazy, but that's a great idea. That's just crazy talk. But I don't know if he's even doing that anymore. But he also says the Pomodoro technique is the best way he's found for energy management. I love that too. I use an app called Focus to do, which actually I can put my task list in, and it does the Pomodoro technique, and I really, really, really like it. So yeah, great tips here. Connor, you had a question.
Yeah, so I know even with all that time blocking and planning, it's still so crucial that whatever you create when it comes to your side hustle, you're getting the most out of it, right? You're maximizing every single piece of content that you create, whether it's a podcast, a video, a social post, a blog, email, all sorts of stuff, especially when you have such finite time throughout the week that you can work on something. Lindsay, you're talking about batching content and creating content like on specific days, knowing that, hey, this isn't just something I'm creating for a one-time, one thing in the ether kind of post or whatever it is, but I can stretch this out and I'm getting the best bang for my buck. When it comes to repurposing, what are some effective strategies that you've started to implement or you've been implementing that you see great results from?
Yeah. Okay. Really quick before I dive into repurposing, I want to share something that it came up for me this morning, and I was like, ooh, if this comes up on the show, I'm going to share this. So one thing with my content is that I try to, like you said, maximize it to the fullest potential. And so I try to be very intentional about call to actions and making it very easy for people to click my links. Like I don't need to be searching through everything to try to find. So I was listening to a podcast this morning for someone I really admire, and they're opening up a new program, and they're talking about it. And so I was sitting in the Starbucks drive-thru, and so I'm like scrolling. I just click on my podcast app. I'm like, oh, surely this person has a link that I can click on, to check out this program, and I'll save it for later. No link, and I'm like, what is wrong? So the podcast is over. I'm not going to go back probably and search for that. So I try, and of course we're all human, so you forget sometimes, or things slip, but making sure that you are optimizing everything you're putting out. So your emails have clickable links, your profiles on social media are all optimized. So my cover photo, even if you click on it, has a clickable link to my website, my free group, etc., so that it is a no-brainer for people to be able to find a way to get to my website, check on my podcast, etc. So I don't know if you guys have ever run into that. Like I ran into that. Someone else was talking about, skincare products they have. And I'm like, oh, I know they deal, I don't know, Mary Kay or something. And I'm looking at their profile. I can't find a single way to click on their link. And I'm like, well, they just lost a customer. So that's one of the things that I try with all my pieces of content, not every piece of content. And obviously, Instagram, you have your link at the top, but making sure that you have those things. Because if not, you're just missing out on free ways for people to find you and to work with you. So, wait, Connor, can you repeat? Oh, repurposing. Okay. I was like, wait, I talked about that. Now I forget the question. Okay. So for repurposing, I have my podcast, and that's where I get a lot of my content from. So I like to start with some form of long form content. So podcasts, sometimes it's a blog, sometimes it's an email that I write that I feel really inspired to write. And then I'm like, okay, I could definitely dive deeper into this and do a podcast or a video. So start with something longer form, and then I cut it down into the smaller pieces. So that's, essentially what repurposing is. But then once you get to a certain point in your content creation, if you have made, 20 podcasts, written 20 blogs, even longer posts on Instagram or something like that, you can start repurposing. You can pull those topics out. You don't always have to be recreating the wheel. I actually was listening to, I think it was the Rachel Hollis podcast this morning also. And I listened to it for about 10 minutes, and I was like, I've totally listened to this podcast before. Like she, this exact podcast. And she never said at the beginning, this is a replay. Some people say replay or throwback or things like that. Right. She just ran it again. And, I think it's probably been a year or two since she played it. I don't even know why. It was this particular story she was sharing that was very memorable. But we get so in our mind that we always have to be creating something new. And that's not true, because the majority of the time, people aren't going to be weird like me and remember
Right.
the exact post or remember the podcast. And even if they do, like, I still listen to it because I enjoyed hearing it before and learning from things of it, before. But again, it's like that whole mindset piece that the majority of people aren't seeing your post for the first time anyway.
Right.
What's it, like 7% of people
Yeah,
see
that's bad.
something? Same thing with your podcast. The people who are listening to your podcast now, some of them might be the same people from a year ago or 2 years ago, but I bet you have a lot of new listeners as well. So it's okay. I ran a couple episodes that were older episodes that did really well a few years ago while I was at home recovering from my surgery, just because I would rather air something like that than create one when I'm like taking
Mm-hmm.
pain medication. I have no idea what I'm going to say,
That's
so
right.
allowing yourself that grace. But I also use tools. So I know you use what's the app we were just, is it Repurpose, Jeff?
Restream for this show where you're able to go in and like Lindsay is able to share it to all her channels, and I can pull up comments from her people that are coming on the show. So yeah, that's one of the tools I use for that. I use Descript for all the repurposing stuff for
Yep.
the clips for the show. Yeah.
I just started Descript in the spring. I'm really loving it. But I use StreamYard, so it's similar to Restream, but not quite as cool as Restream, actually. So maybe I will.
So we're actually
be
using
switching.
Ecamm. We're actually using Ecamm because they are the sponsor of the show. But we take
Yeah.
Ecamm and we put it to Restream. It's really cool because I can send out one signal to Restream. They split it out everywhere, and also I can share it with you and like go to your YouTube channel and all that stuff, and not have to do any security stuff. So it's kind of a combination of everything. But yeah, those tools they can
For
change.
repurposing. Yeah.
Yeah.
They cut your clips up for you. So like you don't even have to think about, what was the thing that someone said that was most mind blowing. They'll pick out, some of the top clips and you're like, okay, here's a reel, or you're able to download it and then put it on YouTube and put it all of the places to have your visibility everywhere without spending hours doing it. So definitely check out different tools like that. Has been really helpful for me for repurposing too.
Yeah, and you mentioned redoing podcasts, and our friend Lou Mangello he's gone and thrown his back catalog, and he actually has a podcast that come out on a different day. It's like from the archives or something like that.
Yeah.
Another thing you can do is like if you start a podcast or you start a live show, a lot of times when people see you do that, you'll be asked to be on other shows. It just happens. Like people will ask you to come on. One of the things you can do is like, hey, can I release this on my podcast platform or repurpose it in some way? So, for example, I was on Eric Fisher's Beyond the To-Do List podcast, which is a great podcast. Honored to be on there. And I said, hey, can I have those files and release it on mine? He says, sure. And so give him credit, but he's showing up in two places. I'm getting content that I don't have to worry about, using. It's kind of the best for both worlds. Kind of the pod swap is a thing to do. So think about that. But also, like Lindsay was saying, like her pillar or piece of content is her podcast. Like that's her thing that she gets a lot of other stuff from. And so the live show is for us. That's where we get a lot of things. My daughter Abby goes and helps chop all this stuff out. But a question in that vein is like, what is your system for managing and scheduling your social media posts for your business? Because you have multiple products, like you have your courses, you have your mastermind that you mentioned is going to roll out, and then you have just kind of normal social stuff to keep people interested. Do you have a pattern or anything that you use specifically, Lindsay, that you for your social media to get people interested in you?
Yeah, so I again do the theme days. I love a good theme day.
Yeah.
So Mondays, I always talk about my podcast because the podcast drops on Mondays. So it just makes sense for that. And then I also do some sort of a motivational post. I not only like theme days, I like alliteration. So Motivation Monday. Tuesday is Tip Tuesday. So I love teaching. That just comes very naturally. So, and I think no matter what your business is, a Tip Tuesday would make sense for you. So you're teaching something to your audience on Tuesdays. Wednesday is kind of whatever I'm feeling like. I try to post a reel on Wednesdays. I've gotten off of that habit the past couple months, but I'm getting back into that. So reel on Wednesdays. Thursdays, I promote a product on my wall. And that had huge success for my business because I found that I loved creating content. I loved the teaching content. I could talk about my podcast all day, but when it came to actually promoting my offers, it was the hardest thing for me to do. I don't know why. I think probably a lot of people can relate to that. But if I didn't have Thursdays being a promotional day, I just wasn't promoting. And sometimes I allow that to be promoting a freebie as well, but I've gotten better about making it something that is paid. And then Fridays is kind of like my fun Friday. So I try to share something a little more personal, but still weave my business into it somehow. So, this is something I achieved this week. This is what's going on, just something more personal where I can
Mm-hmm.
connect with people. And then the same things for Saturdays and Sundays. I do more personal posts. And I'm not one of those people that have built my brand where it has to be completely about my business. I weave a lot of my personal life into it. And that's worked really well for me with my personal brand. I've built a lot of my brand on Facebook. So that it just has made a lot of sense. If your brand is not a personal brand, that might not make as much sense, but I do pepper that in, and I don't really, have a set schedule for that. But then I just use Meta Business Suite to schedule everything out. It's really easy. I can connect my Instagram, Facebook, and I can also post in my Facebook group. And I just go directly in there and do all my scheduling that way. I used to use Canva to schedule. The only thing that got tricky with Canva is that I create templates in Canva for a lot of my posts. And I would just go in and tweak them. But when you can't really do that if you're scheduling, you have to make a copy, and it was just cluttering up my Canva, and I like to
Right.
keep it very organized with my templates. So templates is another thing if you don't have templates, and it does make sense for your business. So if you have a podcast, creating a template for, a guest, introducing a guest on your podcast, or, a new show can save you a lot of time in the long run too.
Mm-hmm.
So creating those things, but yeah, I just use old fashioned Meta Business Suite, sit down, make sure it's scheduled out for the next week coming up, and go from there. But Reels, I try to do organically within the app. I don't schedule those usually.
Awesome.
So a
Awesome.
follow-up to that, because I think you kind of mentioned it, would you say Facebook is the platform that you spend the most time on promoting stuff? And then also, what is the platform that gets you the most return when you're posting?
Yeah, it's Facebook for both, actually. I have tried to do that on Instagram. My personal Instagram, actually, with 11,000 followers, disappeared in March.
Oh
So
gosh.
I have rebuilt, or started to rebuild, my Purpose and Pixie Dust Instagram. I think it has 200 or 300 followers. But I actually really enjoy it better now that I don't have so many people. And I don't even know why. It's almost like the pressure is off to, and this sounds silly, but like be so perfect showing up online.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is what I was able to do on Facebook too, is just be very me. Like I didn't ever feel like I needed to always be throwing out educational content all the time. Like I just weaved it very naturally into my personal brand. I also don't know if it's my age demographic as well, that Facebook, we started with Facebook
Right.
however many years ago. And so it's just more natural for me there. But I do repurpose my content from Facebook over to Instagram. But yeah, Facebook has been my platform of choice for a long time. And my Facebook group as well is a big place where I get a lot of customers.
That's really
So
good.
when you're repurposing content, I think when you first post it, you have a set of metrics that you're looking for, whether it's the first blog post, right? The first podcast episode, whatever it is, what you're looking for that. But when you're repurposing something, whether it's pulling clips from a long form piece of content and posting it somewhere, or like you said, posting from one platform and then repurposing it to another, how does that differ? Like, how do you measure the success of just a repurposed piece of content?
Yeah. I like to look at engagement just overall. I prefer comments versus likes on things, obviously, to keep a conversation going. But I have also learned that the metrics especially like on Instagram, are not always an indicator to me, especially if I'm looking at comments, of whether things are actually hitting home with people. And I don't know, you guys, I'm sure, have realized this as well too, but I just had someone for the first time comment on one of my podcast posts, on Facebook rather, but they said how much they enjoyed this podcast. I didn't even know they were a podcast listener. So that can be one of the things, especially with podcasting, but anything on social, is you never really know who is watching or following your stuff. So it can get very, I know I can get very in my head when I'm looking at analytics and like, okay, no one liked this post. No one. And if that's happening over and over and over again, if you're just posting a lot of content with no engagement at all, then it's time to reconsider your strategy and tweak things a little bit. But as long as I'm getting some sort of engagement, I call that a win. which
Yeah.
probably is not the best business answer, but just for me because we can't control what people are doing and not doing.
It's with the algorithms, like you said, that's why you continue to put stuff out there. I put clips out all the time, every day. We put out stuff of this show every day. I've never had anybody complain, ever. Saying, like, you're posting too much. Like, because the algorithms, they take care of all that. So there's a great comment here. Dustin says, sometimes starting a brand new social account is a relief. He's been thinking about starting over on X for years. And that's really interesting to hear from Dustin. Is old school. He's OG. He is like the president, CEO, big cheese over at Magi, a great tool, AI tool that everybody should go check out. But it is refreshing. Sometimes it almost becomes a hassle to continue to keep up with everything. And I'm sorry you lost 11,000 followers, though. Man, that's a whole nother story.
I know.
Oh man.
It is. But you know what? Like I said, it was getting to the point where it felt like a chore to show up on that platform. And now that I have restarted, and it's like my feed is actually filled with people that I want to be seeing all the time. Not that, okay, if you're not following me right now and you were before, it's not that I don't want to see you. Like, please come over and follow my new account. But still, it just was kind of such a relief. And then also I could really, start over a little bit. So I like changed my brand color slightly. I'm like, I can change what I'm putting out and the voice that I'm using. And that was kind of nice. So it's made me really start enjoying Instagram a little bit more.
Yeah. Something that everybody enjoys is our friends over at Ecamm. You can find out more about them at ecamm.com/Jeff. They have their amazing community. So helpful if you have questions. If you haven't tried Ecamm yet, go to ecamm.com/Jeff. Use code Jeff15 to save 15% on your first purchase and join their community. They're on Discord. They're on Facebook. They're just amazing. Seth Godin stopped in there the other day, asked a question. And they were like, what? Yeah, Seth Godin was there. Michael Hyatt pops in there every once in a while. So they're very helpful. Even big names come in and ask questions. So it's a really great community. Make sure you guys go over there and follow them wherever you're at. So I want to kind of circle back because we talked about the importance of the time management and some systems that you put in for multiple projects. So you've got multiple things going, like Mastermind. You're getting ready to launch that again. You've got your Facebook group. Are there like management techniques that you're using to balance multiple projects? I know you have theme days, like I'm going to work on the podcast today, but there's a lot of stuff. Do you like use Asana? Like any other tools that you use to like keep track of all this? Because that's a lot, and you've got a teaching job at the same time. So my mind goes like that when I think about all the stuff that you're doing. So what management techniques, I guess, are you using?
Yeah. So one of my favorite is I use Trello, not Asana, I use Trello.
Yeah.
And I love ClickUp. I love Notion because you're a big fan of Notion, Jeff, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yep. And because I watched your presentation at Momentum on that, and I love that. I loved the idea of that too, but everything of mine is in Trello, and I'm like, okay, I don't have the energy right now to transfer everything over and learn something new. So I think that was something that really helped me, was picking one thing and deciding this is my platform. I'm using it. I'm organizing everything on there. So I have what I call my business blueprint board on Trello, and it's gigantic, but I have everything to do with my business on there. So I have a column. So if you're not familiar with Trello, they're almost like virtual sticky notes you can put in like rows and columns. So I have one for my branding. I have one for anything that needs to be shared with like you to promote this podcast. So when you asked me for my bio yesterday, I went on there, I copied it, I posted it in the email to send you. So anything like that I am asked for over and over again, I need to find some sort of a place for it that I can easily type in a keyboard shortcut on my phone or on my, on my Mac. Those were really helpful for me at the beginning of my business. Anything that I'm repeating over and over again, I'm like, okay, I need to either have a place where I can just copy and paste this or have video links. So that's one thing why I decided to create a course that goes with my mastermind. Is I just created little video lessons for all your pieces of your business that you need. And so that when my clients were coming to me asking me like, okay, how do I set up Linktree? How do I set up email systems, whatever, I could refer them to that and then say, watch this, and then ask me what questions you have. So setting up systems like that for my offers and my business are really, really helpful. I also have all of my ideas because
Right.
if you are an entrepreneur, you have 18 million ideas, but knowing like I don't have time to do all of them right now. So I have like an ideas parking lot on my Trello board that I can go back to where I'm like, okay, I have some extra time in my business. You know, what should I bring up now? So that has been really helpful. But then going back to systems, again, anything that I'm like, okay, this would really save me time if I'm able to do that. I put that on my to-do list. And when I have an extra hour or two in my business, I would create my first email welcome sequence, for example, or create the email that goes out to people when they sign up for my membership. Just anything so that I didn't have to be doing it one-on-one and recreating it every time, that I could automate to set up. Save me a lot of time. And then the last thing is I use Kajabi for my website, and I chose that. It's more pricey, but I've been there for years, and my email's on there, my funnel's on there, my website, everything is in one place. So that saves me a lot of time. I don't have to open up, 5 different apps or websites to use. Everything is in one spot. So when I go in there, I know that I'm there to work, and I can just go down through my task list and get everything done.
Awesome. Yeah. Very, very cool.
And before we get to a comment, I did want to point out 2 things that you said in that. One, I use Notion as kind of a content creation tracker tool like that, but I love that idea of also putting in just all of your frequently asked questions or responses or your brand book even in there for easy access. I think that's so great. And the ideas parking lot, I'm reading Cal Newport's new book, Slow Productivity, and he talks about this idea of instead of pushing projects or pushing tasks that you have to do, come with a pull mindset. So you have this parking lot, and instead of pushing everything in like, I got to get it all done, put it in this parking lot and then pull in new ideas, new projects when you have the time. And that's when you actually like can be productive, right? Instead of just dumping everything like I got to work on a million things. No, pull in when you have time, and then you can go for there. So I love that. And I love Rich's question here too. He says, is it difficult for you, Lindsay, to keep your focus on teaching during the day? His mind often wants to dig into the challenges and tasks of his side hustle while he's working for his main gig during the day. Any tips for keeping your focus where it should be?
Ooh, I love that. I will say sometimes it can be, especially if I'm in the middle of a launch or something where I know people are probably messaging me and I'm like, oh, I need to get back to them. But one thing I learned very early on in my business, because I was so tempted to do that, or I was like, I can't focus on multiple things, was realizing that the way my business is set up, there are really no business emergencies. So even if it takes me 12 hours to get back to someone, like they're not going to die waiting for my response, right? And so realizing that, and also really setting boundaries, like I don't get notifications on my phone. I turned all of that off. I take myself out of group chats. I hate group chats with a passion. And that way I'm just not tempted to go in and feel like I need to respond things, immediately. And I've set those boundaries with my clients as well, like between the hours of 7 a.m. and 3 p.m. I'm unavailable, but I will get back to you in the evening if you respond to me between 3 and 7, or, whatever that looks like. But as far as focus, I think just making sure that I don't have my phone, out and up for me to see, and those notifications off, that helps a lot. And then knowing too that I have that set focus time to work on my business later during the day. So right now I'm able to give my all to being present and to doing what I need to do. Because if I'm not, then I get to the end of my teaching day and I'm like, okay, I didn't get anything done here either. So now I, need to bring stuff home, and I have a set boundary. Like I'm not bringing stuff home. Like I'm getting it done during the school day. So those boundaries are really huge. And whether you have a side hustle or not, if you're a teacher, or I say especially teachers, but really any occupation, leave your work at work as much as you possibly can. And I don't have my work email on my phone, so I'm not tempted to check that when I'm at home. Like I just very clear, like I'm not responding to you after 2:45, children at school. So if you have a question, you better ask me before then. And so those boundaries are one of the biggest things that have helped me.
So you probably answered this a little bit with that last answer that you had, but can you share some tips on how to avoid burnout while managing that side hustle and a full-time job? I mean, you mentioned clear boundaries. Are there any other things that have helped you avoid burnout? Because I can see, even with the best systems in place, you can easily teeter towards burnout when it's like, okay, I got a membership like launch coming up. Like I've got to get stuff done, and that can put you over the edge a little bit to that burnout.
Yeah. So the awareness piece, Jeff, like you mentioned earlier, was really huge for me. So I know that if I don't get 7 or 8 hours of sleep at night, like I'm just not a nice person. So I try my very, very hardest. Business stuff ends at 8, and I don't allow myself to go over that unless it's like a one-time thing. Like I think we had a momentum follow-up call one night and it went till like 8:30, and I'm like, okay, I'll do it this one time. But normally, knowing that my mastermind calls, for example, go from 6:30 to 8, and they don't go longer than that. And so knowing myself and what works, really well for me, because I did get to the point of burnout with my network marketing business. I was pushing for a goal. People were buying so much stuff. I was staying up until 12, 1, 2 in the morning and getting up at 5 to go to work. And I was seeing amazing results, but I kind of hated everything I was doing. I was not a nice person, all that. And so knowing how crappy I felt during that was like, okay, I need to make sure that I'm getting enough sleep. I'm moving my body. I'm planning the fun things, like not working my business all the time. There are seasons for sure where I am spending all of my free time, prepping for a launch, things like that, but it's just a season. So if you catch yourself doing it for longer than you feel is sustainable, it's a year-round type of thing, and your personal relationships are going in the drain or whatever that is, it's time to reevaluate and just know, if you can't spend that much time in your business, one, you're at least showing up consistently. It doesn't have to be constantly, but it gets to be consistently, doing what you can, and just knowing if it takes you then another 3 or 6 months to get to your goal instead of getting to it right now, that's okay, because you're still taking care of yourself and prioritizing all the things in life that are important to you, not just, your business, but planning the fun things. And also, as we mentioned earlier, getting in the mastermind or getting in that, that business community and accountability partner to hold you accountable, or a coach, has been really helpful for me as well, to make sure that I'm keeping myself in check, still getting my business things, in order, and having fun while doing it. Because if you're hating your business and resenting it, like I said, it's not sustainable. And what's the point? Like it's not worth all the money in the world for me if I hate what I'm doing.
That is a great way to end the show, but so much good stuff for everybody. I mean, most of us are doing some sort of side hustle, or even if we have a client who's like our pillar client, we're still, a lot of these things apply. So thank you, Lindsay, for all the great tips and advice for today. Before we wrap things up, where can people, you mentioned you've got a mastermind launch coming up. Where can people find out about your products, your stuff, everything that you got going on? Let people know.
Yeah. So I'm Lindsay Dollinger, all the places. So if you head to my website at lindsaydollinger.com, I have a free resources page that you can pick, like I'm newer in business or I'm established in business, and you can pick the free resources under each category that pertain to you. So do that, get on my email list, and you will hear all about the mastermind coming up very, very soon.
Awesome. Can't wait for that. By the way, Gary Stockton agrees. He goes, I need minimum 7 hours sleep or I turn into the Huntington Beast. Otherwise, instead of Huntington Beast. Yes. That's a good one, Gary. That's what I'm going to call you from now on. Connor Brown, the unsinkable Connor Brown, where can people find out more about you and what you got going on lately?
You can find out more about me at vacationkingdoms.com and across the social medias at Vacation Kingdoms. It's June. You know what is a great time to do in June? Plan your Christmas vacations. Of course, reach out to me and I can help you with that.
And look whose ears are burning. Lou Mangello said, hey, I know these people. We won't admit it, but yeah, we're fans of Lou. He's got momentum coming up, by the way, folks. So if you want to meet people like amazing Lindsay and amazing Connor Brown, this is where I met all those folks at. Make sure you go check out Momentum. I think he's still got a sale going on right now. If you guys go check that out at loumangello.com. Gave you a free plug. Yeah, he loves us because we gave him a plug, is what he's saying right there. But yeah, it's a great event. I cannot recommend it highly enough. He caps it at 50 people, so make sure you get there. I think it's halfway sold out. And another thing that is sold out is the amazing thing that's going on the end of this year at Creator Camp. That's right, Ecamm Creator Camp has been sold out, but you have a chance to win a free ticket that I have reserved just for you. If you go to jeffc.com/win, you can enter to it, win a chance at a ticket. So make sure you guys go there and fill out that form. It's going to be amazing. Momentum and the Creator Camp are like 2 weeks apart. Like, it's crazy times at the end of the year, but they're going to be awesome. Connor will be there as well. So thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you, Lindsay, for showing up and giving us all this great advice today. And with that, we'll see you guys next time. Bye, everybody.